Okay, well, I guess we will go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Marketplace Risk Virtual Event Series. My name is Andrea, and I'm the Director of Events and Logistics here at Marketplace Risk. Today, we welcome our advisory board members, Saray Covey with Know Your Merchants, Jennifer Kelly with Etsy, Matt Bendett from Peerspace, Eric Timmreck from OfferUp, Mike Wilkins from Turo, and Megan Poonolly from Care.com. Our virtual events are designed to help marketplace and sharing economy startups successfully navigate complex risk management, trust and safety, compliance, and legal subject matter so that they can avoid distractions in order to focus on launching and growing. Check out marketplacerisk.com to access hundreds of hours of content, including our master's program, platform podcast, and previous live events. And to subscribe to our newsletter where we keep you up to date on everything, including our upcoming Sharing Economy Global Summit in London. Thank you for tuning into today's session presented by our advisory board. A couple housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so the recording will be available for you to access on the Marketplace Risk website. Second, all attendees have listening capabilities only and are otherwise muted. And third, submit your questions via the control panel. If we don't get to them at the end, feel free to email us at info@marketplacerisk.com and we'll get your questions answered. And now, without further ado, I will hand things over to our presenters.
Hello, I'm Saray Covey with Marketplace Risk and Know Your Merchants, and we're going to start today with a brief introduction for each of our speakers about them and their marketplace, as well as how you prioritize your trust and safety functions. And we'll start with Jennifer. Oop, can you hear me?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay, great. GoToWebinar is a new platform for me. I think I'd seen them all at this point, but you got me with this one. So hi, I'm Jennifer Kelly. I'm happy to be here today. I currently lead Marketplace Integrity at Etsy, which is one of the verticals in our broader trust and safety organization focused on mitigating legal and regulatory risk. And that includes content moderation, intellectual property notice and action and counterfeit enforcement, a long tail of legal process, and our vetting team, which works with our marketing organization to make sure that our features are vetted by the trust and safety function before they go live. So a little bit about Etsy. We were founded in 2005 in Brooklyn, New York. We're still headquartered in Brooklyn. And we're the global destination for unique, handcrafted, and vintage treasures. We have a mission to keep commerce human. And I like to say that that mission extends to the work of our trust and safety teams as well. Buyers come to Etsy to be inspired and delighted by items that are crafted and curated by creative entrepreneurs. And a fun fact is that 80% of Etsy sellers are women selling from within their homes. So our seller base are micro entrepreneurs selling unique items. And I can speak a little bit more to just briefly the structure of trust and safety before passing it off. Trust and safety is a large function in Etsy. Like I said, Marketplace Integrity focuses primarily on legal and regulatory risk. We also have a seller risk function, which focuses on fraud reduction, merchant risk, which we call seller risk, ATO, and seller verification. Etsy has a payments business within it called Etsy Payments. So we also have in our trust and safety function a number of payments compliance operational teams like anti-money laundering detection and so on and so forth.
Thank you so much. We'll go on to Mike.
All right, also getting used to GoToWebinar here. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those all over the world joining us. It's great to be here. I'm Mike Wilkins. I head up trust and safety at Turo. We're the world's largest car sharing marketplace, competing directly with the traditional rental car players. We're currently across the US, Canada, the UK, and France via our recent WeCar acquisition. For guests, those that are looking to access and utilize a vehicle for 1 to 30 plus days, we provide the most diverse selection of vehicles available, over 1,300 makes and models. And you'll often be able to get that vehicle delivered directly to an airport, hotel, or other location of your choosing. For hosts, those that are listing vehicles on providing supply on our platform, we provide the opportunity to monetize an underutilized asset. If you're like me, your car sits idle 95+% of the time. And to start a small business, many of our hosts on average earn up to $10,000 per vehicle per year. And many of our all-star and power hosts will earn even more than that. Our trust and safety organization is responsible for verifying customers, detecting and mitigating fraud, managing payment risk and compliance, and ensuring online and offline safety for our millions of customers. This includes incident response, engaging and educating law enforcement officials on the local, regional, and federal levels, and partnering with really every company, every team in the company, product technology, legal teams, to build trust and improve the customer experience as we scale. Our org has always fallen under the COO CEO. We're a pretty customer obsessed company. If you know our CEO, Andre Haddad, complete obsession on the customer experience, and especially we understand we need to reduce incident rates, but we also need to have a best-in-class teams ready to respond to support our customers and community when things go wrong. And lastly, benefited a lot from the industry colleagues. I see folks in a lot of friendly faces, friendly names on this call, and definitely look forward to the rest of this discussion today.
Thank you so much. And we'll move on to Eric.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Timmreck from OfferUp. I'm the head of trust and safety. I joined OfferUp in November of last year. We're a C2C marketplace connecting buyers and sellers, sell a wide variety of things. At the moment, we have somewhere in the range of 250, 260 employees and 20 million plus monthly active users. Historically, over 100 million app downloads. So pretty good sized user base. As far as trust and safety is concerned, we are located in the product organization. So the product team includes folks focused on search and browse and all those things, and we're in there too. And while sometimes in places I've been in the past, trust and safety really is mostly focused on the S part, the safety part. We have both. So we have PMs and engineers on the trust side, building identity and sort of pushing good behavior up, as well as PMs and engineers on the safety side, monitoring for undesirable activity. Our team is a decent size for a company of this size, and we have a lot of partnerships that we work closely with. The company legal, customer service, lots of close alignment there. But ultimately, OfferUp thinks about trust and safety as a strategic function, just like anything else that is here to protect the customer, keep the customer, foremost in our minds, and drive retention and conversion. So that's us.
Thank you so much. And on to Matt.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. My name is Matt Bendett, and I am a co-founder and senior vice president of global operations for Peerspace. Peerspace is a marketplace that deals with hyper short-term bookings of physical spaces for all types of activities outside the home or office. So meetings, events, photography shoots, film shoots can all happen on an hourly rental basis across commercial real estate and residential properties. And as you would assume, there's a big component that is trust and safety related, because we are connecting, like many of the other panelists here, we're connecting two parties who haven't met in real life and need to interact in the real world. So you can't have a marketplace without trust and safety being a central component there. Trust and safety does sit under operations. There is a team that is focused on both sides of the equation, as Eric was mentioning. We are taking care of making sure that fraud risk is mitigated and all the kind of would-be bad actors, as well as just trying to sit in the background and see what kind of activities happening on the platform that could create risks for our hosts or our guests, and try to assist our customers to make sure that they are aware of those risks and understand how to mitigate and limit them so that they can have a safe booking or a safe event. And we really believe that our goal in trust and safety is to create a safe, transactable community where we're really facilitating two parties coming together to have a really great, memorable experience. So trust and safety plays a critical part of the business overall. They work very closely across product and engineering functions. It's been just a critical function of us from the get-go here at Peerspace.
Thank you so much. And on to Megan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Poonolly. I'm happy to be here. I am the head of safety at Care.com, where I lead the global trust and safety organization. Care.com is the world's largest platform for finding and managing high quality family care. And this includes everything from child care to pet care, senior care, household help, really any of that care that you need to help your family run and to help you actually go to work. And Care.com was founded in 2007, one of the marketplace OGs. And we also have a B2B division, Care for Business, which is a service that provides backup care and other care-related benefits for employees at the companies who partner with us. We're a global company and we're available in around 17 countries. As far as how trust and safety is organized, we split trust and safety into two main departments, safety operations and safety policy and strategy. And both of those departments are designed to live out our vision of safety, which is that from opening Care.com to opening their door, members feel safe and know that their safety is our priority. On the safety policy and strategy team, that is the team that's responsible for developing our safety policies from a membership eligibility perspective to product policy as well. So they're the team that is working with product to develop our policy around new safety tools. What is the logic that we're going to use? How are we going to think about that? They partner closely with product there. And that team is also responsible for research and insights into the things that are occurring on our platform. On the other side of the house is the safety operations team, and they are responsible for executing our safety policies, standards, and our overall program. And that team is divided into two subgroups. So we have a proactive function, which is the safety screening team. That team focuses on reviewing results from our various background checks and screening and safety tools and moderation efforts. The safety incident response team is the more reactive function that is responsible for reviewing reports related to safety concerns. As far as reporting structure, I report up to the general counsel. But because safety is so cross-functional, in addition to our org, we have a safety committee, which is comprised of leaders from other parts of the organization, including product, comms, legal, data insights. And the purpose there is to really align and get buy-in on all the different things relating to safety. And so that's how we structure it at Care.com.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate, thank you everyone for joining, and I really like the diversity of services that we have in this discussion. So I was going to go on to the second kind of round robin discussion points on what are some of the most common trust and safety issues and how you confronted them at your org. And we'll start with Jennifer.
Great. Yeah, so actually a great segue from how Megan concluded. What I want to talk about is the complexity of trust and safety. And skipping to the answer before the question, I think the answer is cross-functional collaboration, and that'll look different when you're an early stage startup or when you're a more established company. But there needs to be a recognition that trust and safety in a silo will be ineffective. There are product strategies that need to be considered because those strategies will create risk that trust and safety teams need to incorporate into their planning. But there's also education that trust and safety teams can provide to product teams to help them build trust and safety by design in the product, which will ultimately reduce cost on the trust and safety side, and so be a more efficient way to work. But then even beyond that, trust and safety needs to be an operational team that manages sort of industry standard operational metrics, hits their SLAs. That's a large organization with many different areas of complexity. That's a whole skill set in and of itself. Then there's a trust and safety product and tooling and sort of customer UI framework that needs to be considered, which is at Etsy led by a product team who owns a product strategy that supports and works closely with our operational teams. There's analytics needs, and there's a really close partnership with legal. So recognition that this is not, trust and safety professionals don't operate independently. To succeed, they need to be really plugged into the entire organization. It's an incorrect framing to think of trust and safety like compliance. It's something much more dynamic. It's central to the brand reputation of the company, and it needs to be woven throughout the whole fabric.
Thank you so much. And on to you, Mike. Oh, volume. Unmute.
Perfect. I had to be, somebody had to do that, right? So yeah, what Jennifer said is perfect on, right? Trust and safety really being embedded in the DNA of the company. And I think at an early stages company, you can feel a bit siloed as resources are generally focused on growth, but that's the best time to get started. And when I think of cross-functional efforts to really resolve some issues, one thing, it's never a good thing when a bad actor tries to hide their identity to take advantage and target your marketplace. And account takeovers or account security issues and identity fraud issues are two of the most expensive and impactful issues that marketplace face. So for us with account security, we've been really proactive on this. As soon as we started seeing these issues, we started partnering with our engineering team. For bot-driven attacks, we found that partnering with world-class vendors like Cloudflare and Google has really allowed us to reduce those issues. We've built out a two-factor authentication flow for different risk signals and changes of information that can occur. And we've seen that as we lock down fraud, different easy to conduct fraud, if you don't have the defenses in place, they start to change, bad actors will change their tactics. So more human-driven attacks to try to gain unauthorized access to accounts. And that's where our fraud fighters on the fraud prevention team are really working every day to find different ways, different methods, querying to really understand when those attacks occur and to prevent them from actually causing issues for our customers and brand. And then with identity fraud, this is definitely the most expensive area for us. Generally, when somebody's, again, committing identity fraud, it's never a good thing. What we found that's really worked well long-term is building data science models. We know that document verification, those type of methods are very impactful at reducing that risk, but it's also a huge conversion issue for the good customers that just don't want to give their documents and take selfies. And so really using data science models to be predictive and target a smaller subset of users for that friction at digital onboarding, while coupling that with offline verification processes to ensure that when a guest picks up a car, there is a secondary verification that's conducted, has really helped us reduce and contain identity fraud. But as we continue to move on, we know that customers want more seamless experiences. So we're working with different technology solutions to really make that offline verification as seamless and secure as possible.
Thank you so much. On to Eric.
First of all, I'd say it's interesting how similar the marketplaces are. I mean, I agree with everything that Mike and Jennifer just said. I could have said those same things. But I'll talk about something a little bit more deeper. And it's just that at OfferUp, while we have plenty of issues that we face every day, one that is front and center for us at the moment is scammers. And they're very motivated. There's a lot of money to be made by scamming. And so our approach, and I'd say we're on this journey, we are not finished by any means, but our approach is to provide appropriate friction based on signals. And that friction should exist throughout the entire lifespan of the interaction. So from the moment that we first see something show up that seems a little bit fishy, there are those signals that come in and certain amount of friction that we can throw at that point that's appropriate, on and on and on and on as the relationship continues, until at some point, especially if it's a bad actor, they pass over a threshold and get removed. But our strategy at the core is that it's providing appropriate friction throughout the lifespan, and even farther behind that, what I would say is we have a strategy that's just about not letting bad actors do what they want to do. If someone is there and motivated, like their sole purpose for being there is to harm others, then whatever it is that they want to do, I want to take that away. So if they want to create a whole bunch of accounts, or if they want to post a whole bunch of items using automated tools, they're looking for easy ways to do lots of damage. I focus there first. I focus on anything that they want to do. I try to take it away. And ultimately, the goal is to get them into attack vectors that are so labor intensive that it's not worth them coming back. I firmly believe that there are no bad actors out there who are committed to scamming on OfferUp. I think they are committed to scamming. And they choose OfferUp because it's one place they can do it. But if they get to choose between OfferUp and an easier target, they will probably choose the easier target. So my goal is to add the right amount of friction based on those signals and make us a difficult target for those who want to do harm.
Yeah, it's definitely the second to make it not profitable. It's the only way to combat that type of fraud in the system is when it's not profitable anymore. It's too expensive for them to come in and be able to do it. Totally agree. Thank you so much. On to Matt.
Yeah, so I'll give the perspective of a founder who, been there since the beginning, and I'll rewind several years back to just talk about our journey of trust and safety and how I fell into this function, right? Because I'm not a trust and safety professional by trade, but what everybody's saying resonates with me. Of course, we see the same types of issues. It sort of, trust and safety becomes a function by necessity, both because of bad actor fraudsters and because of possible risk that could create anything from compliance or regulatory issues to legal liability risks. And you see that firsthand as an entrepreneur, and you'll start to see it early on by just staying close to your customers. You obviously need a customer support function first, so you're starting to get a feedback loop, and then you might start to see things in your data. One of the things we saw early on was an attempt at collusion, which is where a host and guest is actually the same person or a network of people creating a fake space, a fake merchant account and a fake guest account with stolen credit cards that they can get on the dark web, and just kind of using us as an ATM. And for us, we discovered this when we had our best weekend ever. I want to say this is within a year or two of opening up. We had 3x growth on one weekend. We were so proud of ourselves. Turned out that it was an expensive loss for us. And so those types of things will really spring a company in action in terms of figuring out how to mitigate those losses, particularly when you're not a well-funded organization, and you really need to be protective of that. The other things that we were seeing is, hosts and guests, when there would be missed expectations. So let's say something goes wrong during a booking, the host doesn't show up, which happens very rarely, but the guests can't get into the space, or there's property damage. All these things kind of work their way into a trust and safety realm, because we want the marketplace to be a reliable venue for hosts and guests to come to transact. And so we start seeing this signal, and that really is what spurred us into action to figure out how we can build, more holistic tools to both limit the losses and encourage the trust aspect that would allow for growth to happen. And so mix of tools, that a lot of third-party tools that we use and slowly integrate over time. And one other thing that I think is just really critical for a smaller stage company that doesn't have a fully built out trust and safety function is start documenting processes as you get them. Mm-hmm. I think what we saw early on is anytime something crazy happened, we were just reeling from it. We didn't know what to do. None of us were professionals. None of us are law enforcement or FBI and kind of know how to get into these nooks and crannies of fraud rings, for example. So what we had to do is come up with a process for how we're going to triage these things. When do we escalate to an outside counsel? How do we close an account? Do we shadow ban an account, or do we let them know that we're on to them? These are things that once we thought through them and put processes in place, things started to slow down for us. And what we saw is these different cases got grouped into, you know, a handful of different scenarios that just allowed us to breathe a little bit and realize that we were going to be okay and we were going to continue to evolve. And that's probably the first thing you do before you have your first feature, because trust and safety, as everybody knows, really is a whack-a-mole type of thing. You're trying to, like you all were saying, is get this to be a non-profitable endeavor. So the fraudster moves on or the bad actor moves on, they're going to go hit up the next marketplace. And we all need to work together to do this, but they are smart too. They're going to find new ways to take advantage. And that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, thank you so much. On to Megan.
Sure. So in terms of common trust and safety issues that we see, I think everything that everyone had said so far is pretty applicable, but there are some differences based on sort of the business that we're in. So we're dealing with vulnerable populations, we're dealing with offline conduct for the most part. Our platform is not really transactional at this point, so there's not a lot of the motivation that you see on other platforms for fraud on the company. Rather, you know, we think about fraud upon the company, but also fraud upon our members. So one thing that we saw early on, like back in the early 2000s, were providers that were signing up for the site would sometimes be confronted with scams. So there would be someone posing as a seeker that needed care for their child. I need you to purchase some equipment. I'll send you a check. You know, that classic cashier's check scam that, you know, goes all the way back to Craigslist. And that was something that, you know, you join as head of safety at care.com, you're thinking about the families and the vulnerable populations. But the one thing that, you know, we recognized early on was trust and safety affects both sides of the marketplace. And in that situation, it was affecting the providers. And so we invested in a lot of different tools. Typically, we think of tools and tactics under 3 pillars, so prevention, disruption, and response. So on the prevention side, investing in third-party vendors that are able to apply AI to messaging and content and, you know, provide us with information of whether that person is likely to be a scammer or to commit fraud. And we use that on the prevention side. Also, just giving tips. Education is a very important part of our strategy as well. So, you know, when we welcome providers to the platform, you know, we direct them to our safety center, and there they have some tips on how to avoid being scammed. And that has actually, those 2 things in conjunction have been really effective in helping to bring that down. But we also know that, you know, you try to prevent things, but unfortunately, like, there are the persistent bad actors out there. So we also want to make sure we're disrupting things as soon as we find it. And so for the disruption pillar, we look at monitoring of messages so that we can detect this content as it's coming and responding in kind. So those are some of the unique challenges that we face that's a little bit different.
Thank you so much. I kind of see a lot of, again, the revolving similar things and third-party service providers coming into play and such like that. So for the next round, I kind of want to talk about some of the tactics and techniques that you can recommend to other early stage startups and platforms for identifying, mitigating risk as well, and trust and safety issues, and maybe even on the lines of even how you kind of whittle down some of even those third-party service providers, because there's a lot of players in the space that cater to different types of service offerings and products too, which also would be a lot of helpful for the startups. So we'll go ahead and start with Jennifer.
So I would start by saying, consider scalability before you need it. Etsy experienced explosive growth during the pandemic. It was a wild ride. It was really exciting and really challenging and probably a once in a career event for me. And it was some of the things that we had done prior to that period saved us. We had started investing in documented processes, in structured data, in formalizing some of the cross-functional collaboration that I referenced earlier. And because of that, we were able to respond to that moment and really greet it. So when I say scalability, just a couple of tactical or practical suggestions. Create a risk taxonomy. Trust and safety risks will directly relate to the marketplace. So there are going to be different risks for different marketplaces. Some of us have in-person interactions, Etsy does not. Marketplaces that sell items have content moderation responsibilities that other marketplaces may not have. Different legal regulatory frameworks now emerging globally that impact us in different ways. So define your risks. That will help everyone in the company understand what you're talking about and have a shared understanding, shared starting point for how you discuss your risk appetite with respect to those risks. That's a business decision. So that's, again, cross-functional collaboration to align on what level of risk are we wanting to accept. And that's also point in time. So when you're an early stage startup, your risk appetite is going to look really different than when you grow and become a public company, or, you know, there's different things that are going to dynamically impact that decision making. So it's something that should be revisited. But if you put it into a structure, that'll help you educate and make decisions more readily and smoothly. And a risk taxonomy is just a really vital cornerstone tool that we've used, and it doesn't change much. Once you get it right, it really just serves you for the long haul. And then I would just add, keep the customer front and center. Just like you have to work cross-functionally for trust and safety to work, you have to remember that at the end of the day, what you're doing is supporting your customers' trust in your business. And that's a two-sided business for all of us here. So for Etsy, it's our buyers and sellers. They have different needs, but you have to keep both of them in mind. And there's formal ways you can do that through voice of the customer surveys, through mining member flags or member customer service inbounds. Lots of ways you can do it, but never stop doing it, because they're going to help guide the way for you to evolve your program over time.
Thank you so much. On to Mike.
Great. Yeah, and wonderful, Jennifer. Definitely different. When I think back 8 years ago when we first started our trust and safety organization to where we are now, with almost 50 talented individuals working cross-functionally, a lot of different resources, very different approaches. Thinking back, I think we did some things really well, and we really missed the mark on several areas. So just to kind of run through some of the top of mind things, I think early joining industry groups, so Jennifer mentioned being ahead of the curve, before those issues even develop on your marketplace, before we had account security issues, we developed an understanding that those issues were going to come, and some solutions that were available. It's always better to be proactive in those for these situations. Collecting, Matt mentioned this a bit, collecting, reviewing, and utilizing customer feedback. We often find that before a new attack vector occurs, or whatever it is, customers are going to share feedback, and they might not know what's going on. They also might call things fraud that aren't fraud. They might have a bad customer experience. But digging into that, relentlessly reviewing it, following up with those customers to ask questions and support them, we found that to be really helpful in investigating and determining the scope of an issue before it actually becomes a real issue. Partnering with third-party providers early. If you make a pitch to your product and executive teams that we need to build out, this amazing layered system, when we have one issue, one case that has happened, one issue, you're probably not going to get a great response. But if you say, we need a tool to efficiently, we have a small team, this is a big issue, you may be able to get those resources just to implement a tool like a fraud platform that gives you enough functionality to manage the scale of the issues with your team side. And then developing this is something that we really missed the bar on early on, but we've gotten much better, developing a consistent labeling system. So maybe issues are happening at a low volume, but again, working with the industry and understanding how to classify things with your proprietary administrative system, or if you're using a third-party system, how are you labeling those events? How are you tracking it? How is that populating your analytics and reporting so that you understand the frequency and severity of those issues and the impact on customers and financials for the business? I know that right now we're mostly focused on the false positives, because we're doing such a great job and worked so hard over the years at mitigating the issues. But the false positives, the impact on good customers through those processes can be very detrimental to the business. And again, Matt mentioned education around educating your customers. This is something I would definitely recommend. I think all consumers now know that these issues exist. And so if you can educate and of course work with your marketing teams and others on the language, by providing that education up front, those customers and users might make decisions that actually protect their accounts, protect your business. And when those issues happen, they may know you want to make it really easy to reach out to your teams let us know about what's going on so we can support them and again, lock down what could become a larger issue from there.
Thank you so much. On to Eric.
Those are great points. I would offer the following bullets to early stage startups. Hire dedicated resources and give them power to act. TNS cannot be something that it has to act through influence alone. You have to have folks there who can actually implement things. So engineering teams or whatever it may be. Protect your front door first. Always think about the registration, login events as some of the most important, and put some of your best protections up there to keep the bad actors at bay from the beginning. Use analytics to score everything. Beware of any rollouts that lack appropriate telemetry or monitoring data. It's very difficult to protect if you can't see it, the bad behavior. And so you could be tempted many times. I've been pitched this. This is just something we'll do to begin with. You know, it's just a pilot or something. Next thing you know, you're years down the line and it's missing data, and bad activity can happen on day one. So get that data. Make sure that you're balanced when you think about protections. There are a lot of methodologies out there and frameworks. I have a simple one. Three things. Deterrence. You have to have investment in deterrence, detection, and response. If you have a good balance between those three things, then you'll be in a pretty good spot. And it's easy to overemphasize one. Lots of folks will focus entirely on, you know, deterrence or something like that, and miss detection and response. Last I'd say is never forget the customer experiences. We can't. It's so easy to build protections and say, oh, if we put this protection in, it'll stop this bad activity, or if we put this in, it'll, you know, support good users this way, or it's easy to get focused on one experience, tiny experience you're trying to change, and lose track of the bigger customer experience. So always think about the experiences that you want your users to have, and then build the protections around them, as opposed to the other way around. If you're too reactive, you end up with a fractured customer experience that will not serve your platform well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I definitely agree on data. I am a data queen. Give me all the data, and then we'll decide what we need to look at for secondary. That's great. Now on to Matt.
Wow, that was like everything everybody's been saying. If you are new in trust and safety world and you're trying to figure out what to think about, these are the key items, and it's hard for me to build on that. I'll just add. I'll touch a little bit more on how big the trade-offs are at an early stage in your company. Like you have to grow to survive. Trust and safety ideally should be complementary with that. It should be a growth driver for you, but it can also be something that gets in the way of growth, particularly when it comes to implementing processes, features, even the analytics behind that. That's extra work. And so to the point around building a business case or figuring out how you can try to quantify the really high but very infrequent risk against the growth potential of a feature is a very, very difficult thing to do. It really involves being able to have a thorough sit down with your partners in product and engineering and CEO and just everybody to be able to lay everything out there and get to a company point of view. And then what Mike was saying around, even if you have a way to just start logging things, even if it's in a spreadsheet and you're doing it really manually, start to get a signal, record that over time. It's going to take a long time, and then go back and build a business case and figure out what the MVP is that will help your small team scale a little bit. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is, because we mentioned tools and integrations, there's technical debt with these things, and there's a lot of service providers that have really great solutions. All of them have some small nuance that may make it more right for your business, but it's very hard to know until you've gone through the work to integrate. And as much as, you know, the service providers will say, and they're partially right, you know, that this is like a 1 week engineer task at the most, and you just put the snippet in and everything works. The reality is being able to get that resource might be a difference maker for you, but it's also going to be stack ranked against everything else the company has to do. And if you're anything like Peerspace, you have 10,000 things on that list. So how are you going to get to that top 3 position, you know, even if it is a small task? And so my point around all this is do all you can to try to vet these tools, talk to others in the industry, see what they're using and how they've used it. Try to make the best possible assessment of which one you're going to go with, because it's very hard to strap something in and pull it back out and put something else in. If you're doing something like ID checks or fraud detection, or anything that's running in the background. And that just complicates our job a little bit, but it's really important and a key part of the process to get your first set of tools into product flow that can help your team scale.
Yeah, nice. Thank you very much. I'll also add on when it comes to that third-party service provider piece, as much as you can kind of pull in the product people at the service providers as well, and not just the salespeople, because you'll get the head nods and the yeses, sometimes a little too soon. So sometimes having the actual product manager themselves involved in that conversation, or advanced sales engineering, to kind of get down to some of those deeper, more complex questions can also be helpful when dealing with them as well.
Yeah, and just one last thing to add: if you make the wrong choice on an integration with a tool, that will be your reputation as a partner to product. So you really don't want to sign people up to do work against something that you're not sure if you'll get a good ROI on. I know that's very hard, but your reputation's on the line. So choose carefully and make sure that your engineering team, your product team is fully bought in on the tool, on why it works, on how it's going to work in your flow, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you so much. On to Megan.
Okay, one of the drawbacks in going last is that everyone has covered a lot of the issues I would discuss, but to build off of what Matt said on integrations, like that has been a pain point, right? And it's sometimes, in order to get buy-in from product, you need them to help you do a test or something, right? But I would always recommend doing a test of several vendors against each other before you make a decision. And a lot of times you can do that without product. For some of the back-end tools, you can do an offline test, batch test, and work with the vendor in that way to be able to compare across and make an informed decision without needing to get product involved for just that test piece. Other points I'll make, I will triple down on investing in data from the beginning. You need to make sure you have the right data structures that are queryable. You can throw up a dashboard. It's really impossible to identify the risk or mitigate risks without the data to support it. I would actually recommend like a data analyst being one of your first hires for a trust and safety team. Another piece I'll mention is that, you know, when you're first starting off, sometimes resources are tight, and sometimes they can continue to be tight for many years, but when resources are low, just make sure you're looking to leverage all of the available signals that you have available to you. So if your platform has reviews, is the trust and safety team looking at reviews? Are they looking at like 1-star reviews that come through? There could be signals there that you can leverage. In addition, if your platform has a blocking feature where users can block each other, is there some sort of signal you can get from that? Can you look into that? Another piece is just making sure you have a feedback loop established between the relevant teams when escalations or incidents do occur. You really want to make sure that, you know, when something happens and you're in the moment and you're just trying to make sure legal's involved and you've got comms involved and like everyone is doing their piece, that you don't forget to step back and look at the root cause of the incident and try and figure out, was there something that could have been done differently that might have prevented this? Did our tools work properly? And doing this on a regular cadence can help really identify bugs, quite frankly, in your product, but also it helps to identify and prioritize measures that you want to take in the future. So to points that have already been said, adding to that business case. So it's really important to do that sort of retrospective on cadence. And then finally, one thing I'll also mention is test collecting more information in your enrollment flow than you would initially feel comfortable with, just because it is so hard to add things later. And a lot of safety tools depend on having robust amounts of information, right? In order to run screenings or apply a data model, you need to have information. And if you start off with the most sparse, frictionless enrollment flow you can have, you don't have that information available to you, and it's harder to add in the future, right? Because then everyone's going to say that's too much friction we're adding. So if you can test it in the beginning and see how much you can get away with adding, I think you would be better off later.
I completely agree with that. I always push the boundaries. The more info, the better. Thank you so much for that. I will open it up to questions that we've received on the chat here. Let's see, Andrea, do we have any of the questions? I've got some pre-submitted ones, but I'll let the live submissions come through first.
Yeah, we've had 3 that have been submitted. First question, how do you think about providers with criminal records? What principles guide your decision?
Who wants to hop on that one?
Well, it seems very much like a care.com question. Look, I think that as an initial matter in 2019, we took the step to say that all caregivers on our platform have to undergo a background check that we call care check. So we do think that, criminal history is an important factor in determining whether a caregiver is eligible to be on our platform, because we do know that past behavior is somewhat predictive of future behavior. And that's, a primary risk mitigation tool. But we also realize, in addition to a lot of the country, that there's some serious issues around criminal justice and disproportionate impact. So one of the things that we've done recently is engaged with experts. We actually convened a panel of criminologists, law enforcement, industrial psychologists to help us think about the criteria that we're using to make sure that it is aligned to the risks on our platform, while not being overly punitive or causing a potential disproportionate impact. So one of the guiding principles of our safety program is that we value the humanity of our members. So we know that, when we're making a decision on eligibility, it's super important because for these caregivers, this is an opportunity for income and employment with a family. And so we want to make sure we're making the right decision. So to sum it up, we think criminal history is important, but we try to tailor it according to risk and take into account the very real impact that these decisions make on our providers.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. We have questions still rolling in. Next one. Is there a notification requirement to the data subject in the event a data controller discloses personal information about the data subject in response to a subpoena or law enforcement request?
Oh, so how basically, and would the response be to any of our panel member companies if they did get subpoenaed data requests? Okay. Has anyone encountered that on that front?
I'm happy to. Oh, sorry, go Matt.
I'll just go briefly. We get them occasionally. We want to be cooperative, not because it's law enforcement and we're worried about the relationship there, but we just feel like that's our duty to, especially if there's a possible safety risk or dispute that involves some of our users. But we do require that it's within the terms stated in our privacy policy. And so often, we need that subpoena to come through. We need to pass it through counsel to just make sure that it's valid and this is, what's being asked of it. And then we share that information. We try to be cooperative.
Thanks, Matt. And just to add to what Matt said, it definitely it depends on the circumstance of what's being requested. We investigate and respond to every subpoena that comes through. I know there's been some articles out there recently in the media about fraudsters actually using that request to extract information. So we definitely take a very appropriate steps to investigate, authenticate, understand what's being requested. A lot of the subpoenas will state that you're not to contact the customer to impact the investigation. And we're certainly going to comply and work with that. And then secondarily, we'll restrict any accounts related to that until that investigation is concluded in relation to the activity.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, next question. For in-person services, how do you identify early signs of bad actors?
Ooh, that's another strong care.com one.
So we look at a lot of different signals. A couple that I'll mention. One, we have, I mentioned it earlier about looking at reviews. So reviews are sometimes used by families as a way to essentially flag concerning behavior that, you know, it might be a 4-star review, but there may be something in there that's concerning. And so we have different methods and techniques to look at reviews and sort of call out any information that's concerning and feed that into our system so that we can take that into account. Sometimes we might need to take action based on that. Otherwise, it goes into sort of a rubric that we look at if any future issues arise. We also have reporting mechanisms, so everyone has the ability to report another member in the system, and we look at that. And other than that, we also use some third-party vendors that will flag potential risky behavior that goes into account as well, and we'll review based on the different thresholds. So those are a few of the things that we look at.
Nice. I've also seen in the industry for some other types of like property rentals and things like that, where a little bit of the risk is also mitigated to the person offering the service, where if they don't have a review yet, that the service will allow them, if you don't have a review yet, here's the extra steps you need to take for my verification purposes, or just flat out don't provide services to a first-time user on some of the platforms as well. So that's some other patterns I've seen in the industry as well. All righty.
Question, how would you interpret a they said situation? Do you take the side of the reporter or the reportee?
I missed the very beginning.
Sorry.
Can you repeat that one, Andrea?
Oh yeah, sorry. How would you interpret a they said situation? Whose side do you take? The reporter or the person being reported on?
I want to hear from others on this one.
Good question.
This is a tricky one.
I have an answer. And it gets back to the data thing that everyone's hitting home. If you don't have data, then you have to make that decision. You have to make a determination about who you believe. And that's a hard choice. I don't like to do that. I'm in one right now, and luckily we have the data. And so we have to dig in. It's not something that is readily available. I don't have a report that will show me which one of these two parties is correct, but I have one of the guys on my team digging deep into the records, into the monitoring data, and we will have an answer about who did what first. So my answer is try to avoid that situation by having data that you could dive into to determine the absolute truth in every case.
Yeah, I personally have had an account taken over on a marketplace. And I know when it came into investigating the fraud that happens on my personal account, even, it was kind of a no-brainer by the time it came back to me as the customer, because they could look at my purchase history, they looked at the size of things I've purchased, have I ever submitted a chargeback before, and things like that. So I know from the consumer side, because they had all that data, it was a very quick decision. They shut down the seller account very quickly, and they were able to do that because they had the data.
And also just add around just a quick comment on policy formation. So the clearer you can make policies, the more binary decision. For example, with Turo, smoking in cars is it's a pretty rare issue, but it's an issue, right? I think unless you're a smoker, and that's one where we want to make that as easy as possible to make a decision about who should be charged for smoking. That's impactful. And furthermore, like we actually remove users who smoke in vehicles. So making that decision, we really want to make sure that we're making it very evidence-based versus hearsay decisions.
And I was just going to add that in a lot of cases on our platform, because so much of the behavior is offline, in that personal caregiving relationship, something occurs that they're reporting to us. Sometimes there really isn't data on our system either way. And then if you get into a situation where it's a they said, I think it really just depends on the risk appetite of the platform. And, you can make distinctions between level of severity. So for the most severe types of issues, if it's a they said, you might take the word of the reporting party and err on the side of caution. One thing that we do have is an appeals process so that folks that are closed and removed for safety reasons can appeal. So that's one avenue that allows us to be a little bit more conservative, and then they can provide additional information if they so choose to do so. That might change the outcome of that original decision. But I think ultimately it's something that the platform has to decide, because you will find yourself in those situations quite frequently, unfortunately.
I would just add briefly that consider the interventions that you as the platform may choose to make in a they said that satisfy the needs of both parties, so that you're not always having to penalize one and reward the other. There may be circumstances where you choose to cover the cost of an item that has not been delivered because it was lost in the mail. Seller put it in the mail, all the data points to that, but buyer didn't get their thing. And so rather than spend a lot of time and effort investigating and ultimately making someone unhappy, consider the ROI on intervening and spending your own money in that situation.
Yeah, and to add to that, determine what you're doing as a courtesy versus what you're presumably opening yourself up to liability for. Because as the platform, unless you are making claims of thoroughly vetting all your supply and all your demand, you really will never know. Someone on our team frequently says to me, there's three sides to every story. There's the host, the guest, and the truth. The truth is the hardest to discern. And so, yeah, sometimes you want to mitigate that so you can move on. Other times you're going to need to make a tough decision. And then another scenario, which I just wanted to add, is there are efficient mediation and arbitration services that are out there that sometimes we also use to get off of our plate. If we feel like we cannot make a good call on this, we have clauses in our terms that require like an arbitration escalation between users to alleviate disputes. And it's actually a pretty seamless process. It's not like jams where you're basically doing a whole trial around this. But it allows that decision to also be binding in a court of law if we just don't think we can, make the right decision here because we lack information. We would send that on to the experts. So I'd say look into that.
Thank you. We might have time for one quick one.
Okay, I will read this one quickly. Many platforms are super reactionary to regulations being formed. Can you share how you've used trust and safety to inform proposed regulatory changes?
I can just start by saying that our internal advocacy and government relations function has worked really closely with our trust and safety teams in recent years, especially with the proliferation of platform-focused regulation. There's a lot of policymaking and proposal drafting in the space today. So make friends with those people. You're going to understand as a trust and safety professional the nuances of the way that policy and proposed policy is going to impact you in a way that a lawyer or a lobbyist won't. And so help educate them on the impact so that they can craft their strategy accordingly to educate policymakers, because policymakers also don't always fully understand the unintended consequences of a piece of proposed legislation. It's very timely.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I think we're just approaching at time.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you to our advisory board members for hosting this webinar. As a reminder, check out marketplacerisk.com to access this recording, along with hundreds of hours of content, and to subscribe to our email newsletter to stay up to date on all events. And again, if anyone has any questions or we didn't get to your question today, feel free to email us, info@marketplacerisk.com. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you.